Hey guys, I'm Greg.
I'm John.
So we did a review of the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, non-spoiler review. This will be our spoiler talk. We wrote down a couple of notes of the specific scenes we'd like to touch on or moments in the film.
Yeah, if you want to hear our overall opinion,
Yeah.
you can go check out the main review on the main channel.
Yeah. And the non-spoiler one, what we do mention is that we like the film. It's enjoyable. It's entertaining. However, I think for the most part, John and I did leave disappointed.
It's uneven for sure.
It's an uneven film. The comedy is really out of place a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But you know, one thing we were struggling with was like how to really explain a lot of why we're disappointed without going into detail and spoilers. So that's what this video is for. But we'll start off with some good things that I really liked, like specific scenes I really liked in this film. The highlight of the film for me was the way Yondu was handled.
Totally.
Michael Rooker is like bad guy, also like the best at being a bad guy. We all know.
Being an interesting bad guy.
We know that. And if there's one thing that Walking Dead did really well with Michael Rooker was taking a character who was just, can't swear,
hateable.
restricted mode, hateable, into, he was a good guy after all,
Or at least there was something in there
there's
still, he's not just an evil guy.
Yeah, and this movie does it in a way where it's not, it's not forced. It's not Jason Statham in Fast and Furious or Fate of the Furious. You're like, is he a good guy now?
What's going on here?
Because this movie, when you first see Yondu, it starts off with him looking like rather depressed and lonely, and you can see that his crew of the Ravagers.
Ravagers.
Ravagers are
They're starting to doubt their leader. They think he's gone soft.
Losing faith in their leader. And when the Ravagers do eventually turn on him, the way his character progresses, how he gets thrown in a prison jail, and what in the film for me really started to click is when Yondu and Rocket start to bond with each other. Just in that prison cell, and how they have fun with Baby Groot, I really liked a lot, where they keep having Baby Groot try to retrieve this because his fin gets shot off, and they have a prototype fin that they need Baby Groot to go retrieve. But he just doesn't understand. Baby Groot doesn't understand what he's looking for. And that was a funny segment. But it's specifically the dialogue and the interaction, the relationship that develops with Yondu and Rocket Raccoon. That was the highlight of the film for me.
Well, that's when Rocket, too, started to really become a real part of the movie for me. Because up until that point, he's just kind of... Yeah, Rocket's here.
Rocket's here. He's not even that funny in this movie.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't recall a single joke that he made that was like truly like, that was... Because I remember the first one, I'm like, Rocket was the funniest one. But here I'm like, I mean, he has jokes that I think I laughed at, but nothing that's like truly standout joke to me.
Stood out. And again, like, this is one of the things I thought was the most cool and clever about this movie is the pairing of different characters together. And Yondu is kind of the main plot of the movie to me.
Yeah, he is, and the way, and that whole sequence too, when he gets his fin and he starts using the arrow, that was an interesting scene for me because I'm like, this is pretty cool.
This is awesome.
Yondu killing everyone, but then it also kind of went borderline. Very violent for me.
Yeah, it's like this is a massacre.
This is a massacre, and Rocket and Yondu are loving it. That was the part of it that seemed like kind of. I mean, it's in tune with the character, but so many people are being murdered, and a lot of them are human beings.
It just makes you think about what we're doing here. It's like, on the one hand, just as like a fan of cool outlaw characters, for the edgy morality of that, I'm like, yeah, cool, this is awesome. In like a PG-13 Marvel flick that you might probably take your kids to, I'm a little bit like, he's just killing a bunch of guys.
With an arrow,
an arrow.
And I feel like an arrow is something more felt than a laser gun or something like that shooting them, Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, it's fantasy and whatever, but just that argument doesn't really work that well for me of like, it's PG-13 because there's no blood. I'm like, yeah, but still a bunch of dudes have died.
And they're kind of like maniacally laughing about it.
Yeah,
they're killers in that scene. They're just flat out killers. Both him and Rocket are killers.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's still a cool scene. It's a little bit because I mean, that whole stuff with the Ravagers is one of the darker elements of the film.
Yeah.
Like, and one thing I said in the non-spoiler was I like the darker elements here. Like, I appreciated that scene a lot, where you see that they're putting the Ravagers that were siding with Yondu and just releasing them into space to get frozen and die. And they show that reveal shot of all of them floating in space, and that was a great sequence to me. I was like, that scene really hit for me as a dark moment in the film. I thought it was very effective.
Well, and that was a moment that actually carried some real dread, and just for me as a horror fan, like, that was a nice nerd moment of like, yeah, James Gunn is still drawing from that part of his palette, you know? And
I like when the film gets really weird, too. One of my favorite scenes in the movie is when, I don't know the technical terms
when
they're using.
They're jumping across the galaxy, and they're only supposed to do like 50 jumps at a time, and instead they do 700. Yeah. So they have this really trippy sequence where like time and like space-time is bending, and their faces are warping.
Like, their eyes are coming
out. Their eyes are huge, Yeah,
that was a really fun sequence. I remember laughing out loud a lot during that moment. I think the whole crowd was digging that a lot, and it's cool. And I appreciate the weirdness of the film.
And it's funny because, like, I kind of wanted more of that scene, and it was a weird place for this movie to be like, no, we're going to play it restrained. We're not going to do a whole trippy sequence.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, like, on the heels of stuff like Doctor Strange and some of the other stuff, I'm like, yeah, let's do a trippy scene. Like, because I like those out of Marvel, but...
And we might not stay in complete, linear order here of how the scenes play out. But one thing I said in the non-spoiler was how I felt the attention to detail in terms of character and any, like, just stuff in scenes was not as strong in this one.
Yeah.
That would pull me out of the film and have me say stuff that might sound nitpicky, but it's not. I don't really consider it nitpicky when I feel like the first Guardians just wouldn't do some stuff.
Well, the thing about nitpicks is that if something pulls you out of a movie, then now you're in this place of thinking. Now you're in this like, oh, I'm back in the chair, and now I got to look at this because something pulled me out, you know?
Because when you first see the Guardians, there's that great scene that you see in the trailer where they're fighting that giant, like, octopus squid thingy.
Yeah.
And I like the way how a lot of that was handled. How a lot of it is just you're focusing on Groot, and then the credits are rolling, and every single and then
out
you
of
see
focus
characters
in the background.
Yeah, exactly. And then eventually it comes more into focus. The sovereign characters, the gold people that you see in the trailer.
Yeah.
When Rocket stole the batteries.
Yeah.
if you've seen the movie, Rocket's decision of stealing the batteries played a major problem for every one of our main characters. In terms of detail,
it's a big problem in this movie. It's a weird subplot because it doesn't seem
like it's going to be significant,
but it keeps coming back.
It keeps coming back. It was kind of frustrating to me how the film was trying to portray the sovereign characters as if they're antagonists, as if they're bad guys. Yeah. Like if you pay attention, they're shooting their scenes like they're bad guys when they're not. They had a deal. They gave them Nebula in exchange for taking out that creature. Everything was good about these guys. And then Rocket made a dumb decision to steal their batteries.
Well, didn't they like bring back some batteries? Like, didn't somebody else steal batteries? They brought them back, and then Rocket decides to steal them.
Like 3. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that whole thing really makes it like this movie treats it as though just anyone who's against the Guardians is a villain, and I couldn't let that go. I was like,
no, this is the Guardians'
That's
fault.
a bad decision he made. I would be pissed off too.
In terms of little details, there's this moment where they're walking out. There's all of them are lined up, and all the sovereign people are just watching the Guardians leave. And then Rocket opens his bag where the batteries are glowing, and Drax looks down and starts laughing so loud about how they took the batteries. I was thinking, like, you call it a nitpick, but one of them would have noticed that Rocket had batteries. Like, it was too much in plain sight for me, and the reaction for Drax to not keep it subtle was I don't know. There's just something about that moment that was not fitting for me.
Would Drax just laugh at that?
Yeah.
I always felt like Drax at least had some sense.
Exactly. And when it started to lose me too was the whole sequence where, because I thought the sequence was neat, where all the people in the Sovereign are, you controlling their ships from back at their home base, and they're going after the Guardians.
Oh, that was funny.
My problem with the scene, though, was there felt no real sense of danger, and the Guardians didn't really feel like they were. It just didn't feel like there was any really real danger. And in terms of attention to detail, there's these comedy moments where Star-Lord and Rocket Raccoon are having ego battle over who should be controlling the ship and whatnot. But there's
Are we past this?
Yeah.
With these characters.
But in the moment they start going through this asteroid field where asteroids just appear out of nowhere, and there are times where I'm like, they're just looking at each other right now and arguing when they're going through an asteroid field, and it would bother me how their eyes are fixated on each other as they're swerving. I'm like, no, they would have crashed. They would have crashed because they're not invested on the goal of surviving this.
I thought that scene could have been handled better, just in general. Like, I don't necessarily think that they shouldn't have had them
argue.
I am the best pilot. No, I'm the best pilot. Cool, but
the scene didn't seem to have a care for the balance of the danger and comedy. It seemed to care more about it being a funny scene with entertaining visuals going on there.
Yeah, and it is that. It's like, if you look out the window, it looks like this is a pretty hard way to navigate this, and I just don't believe anymore that if you guys are, like, stealing the controls back and forth, that this flight's gonna go well. You know?
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
The whole, like, even though, like, they're so good that even though they were both battling, it still got done, just didn't really...
But you got, like, 100 ships shooting at them while going through an asteroid field.
And this really dangerous asteroid belt, you have to be the best pilot in the galaxy to traverse. It was just, it was a little weird.
Yeah.
And that whole thing with the Sovereign keeps coming back throughout the movie, and they keep touching on that idea with Rocket. Like, that's what bothered me throughout the movie, was that I kept feeling like they wanted to use this battery thing to prove a point or to make something out of it, and all that really comes out of that entire conflict is just they keep going like, Rocket, you just had to because you got the urge.
Yeah.
And it's not good enough after a while when that subplot just starts to bust in every 20 minutes.
Because there's a lack of consequences that I feel like characters are aware of.
Yeah.
That bother me. And like comedy moments are just out of place. Like, okay, if you're gonna amp up Drax's sex jokes, okay, that's fine, whatever. But it did get to a point where I'm like, Drax is a little too mean for me. Like the way he talks to Mantis and stuff. It, like, while it's, I guess, technically in character, I'm like, at this point, I feel like Drax should be a little bit more aware. If he has a moment during Crazy Danger scene in the beginning where he's learned what's sarcasm, because apparently Drax has learned sarcasm.
Yeah.
Which seemed out of character to me. When Rocket was like, you weren't supposed to tell Star-Lord that we stole the batteries. And he's like, you're right, I don't know what happened. That's a mystery to me. Yeah. That seemed like out of character with the whole how Drax is always honest and sincere and doesn't understand sarcasm and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So apparently he's learned sarcasm. You would think he would learn when he's being way too offensive to some people, like Mantis, for example. You know,
I would have had it that he's like he's learning.
He's learning. Yeah, that could have been a character if you didn't actually give him. He's trying to learn language. You know.
Yeah. See, I was bummed about that because Drax in the first movie is the comedy of Drax is a fish out of water comedy in the first movie. He doesn't have these social cues that we all understand, and that's funny. In this movie, I feel like he's just situation comedy. He's just like, whatever situation they get him in, it seems like the mode is to go, what's a Drax joke for this situation? How about this situation? Oh, he's going to call her really ugly because that's unexpected, you know.
Yeah.
And so...
But then sometimes... But I'll admit that joke at the end did work when he said, like... When he tells Mantis, you're beautiful.
On the inside.
On the inside. Like, that did work as a good callback.
And that's the thing, is there's stuff that he says that is really funny.
Oh, yeah, there are moments that are very... Because even that scene in the trailer that everyone cracks up at when Mantis reads Star-Lord's emotions and he starts laughing, watching the scene in the movie was still really funny. Like, that was still a really funny scene for Drax. But Drax is kind of pointless in terms of helping serve the Guardians as a unit or... advance their mission.
I thought it was cool that they paired him up with Mantis. I thought that was a thing that could work well because her whole thing is that she can sense and you know, take on your emotions.
Yeah. Well, the whole thing with those two is they're honest.
Yeah, I thought that was such an opportunity that kind of works sometimes and then other times just becomes this weird fuel for jokes.
I felt like they lost the emotional side of Drax, which is part of what made the balance of Drax work so well in the first one.
Because he seemed like a whole character.
Yeah. Because, like, they have, like, one moment where he's kind of reflecting on his daughter, which they turn into a joke scene, too, you know, about the whole, you're ugly. Yeah. So, in Drax, there's, like, a couple of things I could think of that are so brief, where he serves a purpose in terms of how, like, because in the opening, when he fights the squid thingy, and he flies into the mouth, that really cool shot, It was a funny moment where he thinks he took down the monster, but he really didn't do anything.
Gomorrah who did everything, yeah.
Yeah, that was funny. And at the two moments I could think of where he does serve a purpose is when at one point when he's hanging outside of the ship, where Drax is apparently just completely indestructible at this point, when he's like getting whacked by the trees and stuff, but when he shoots down the ship, and when he helps carry Mantis up outside in the finale.
Yeah.
You know, but that's about it. Throughout the rest of the film, Drax seems like he's just used for comedic purposes to say funny stuff. And but let's get into some like spoilers that people probably really want us to hear us talk about.
Yeah.
Ego. I really liked. I said mine on spoiler. I love Kurt Russell's performance. I thought Kurt Russell's performance was really good. There are some moments with Ego that seem a little bit off to me. I think a really questionable scene for a lot of people was when Star-Lord... that scene when Star-Lord creates the light, the ball of light. It was a little bit like, whoa, you picked up on that power without any practice. you just
montage, no frustration.
Yeah, you just learned that you could do this and you did it.
Yeah, exactly.
It was so quick. And then they have this moment.
Mary Sue.
Yeah, they have the moment where they're playing catch with each other, which I think would have worked because there's this scene that's kind of foreshadowing that moment where Star-Lord and Gomorrah are talking to each other about how Star-Lord just wanted a dad. He was jealous of other kids who were able to play catch with their dads. I think that scene would have worked if Star-Lord had mentioned something along those lines to Ego himself. But Ego wasn't around for that moment when Star-Lord was talking about his jealousy towards not having that. So when they're throwing the ball back and forth, it was a cute moment. It was a funny moment. I thought it got a little too stretched out when they're full on playing catch and they're like, hey, yeah. Like
that was a moment that I wasn't sure what to do with, because I feel like if the rest of the movie around it was more solid, that might have worked just fine.
Yeah.
Because to me, I didn't really think they needed an extra scene, because like playing catch with your son is such a ubiquitous concept that when they started doing it, I was like, oh yeah, that's cute. He's finally getting to do this.
But they stretch it out.
But yeah, it does stretch out, and I was laughing at the time, but yeah, just with the rest of the movie around it, it does feel like another moment where I'm like, yeah, I would have trimmed this down or something. Like, I don't get why you lingered on this for so long, because I don't see an extra purpose beyond, oh, this is wacky a little bit, you know?
And I thought Ego, the planet, not just Kurt Russell, but the whole planet, I thought was really cool. Mm-hmm. The designs were cool, the world was cool. I like how they were questionable about Ego, but when they get to the planet, everyone who joined Ego on that trip is starting to enjoy and be fascinated in the wonder of it all, and it was bringing some of that back for me.
That's the thing I think is actually pretty cool about this, is I like the way they pitched the should we trust Ego or not, kind of vibe, because they developed that over time, and I thought that was a nice thing they took their time with.
Because in the comics, Ego is a villain. I wasn't aware of that before watching this film.
Neither was I.
I wasn't aware of that, so I thought it was handled really well, because the film sold me that Ego's a good guy.
And you want to like Kurt Russell.
Yeah.
Like you want
and you really care about Star-Lord, because a big part of the first one is he doesn't know who his dad is, and there's a big mystery left up to who his father is. And then here, there's touching moments. I like the chemistry between Chris Pratt and Kurt Russell. I thought they worked really well together. I believed them as father and son with this huge distance and gap, and I could feel Kurt Russell. I love the layer he provided of really, wanting a son and really wanting Star-Lord to be in his life and work with him and all those things.
Oh yeah, and finally finding his child that has the power too,
And Star-Lord's always been a lost wanderer, and he's finding his purpose now. Then that was all very effective. Here's where the film really started to lose me in the finale, though. You see, I like the reveal. When Kurt Russell is giving his speech, you start learning what Ego's really up to, how apparently he just wants to take over the whole universe. And it can make sense. You've been around for millions of years. You have all these unstoppable powers. Okay, I can be on board with that. Kurt Russell's performance was really good there. And when Ego... when Ego reveals to Star-Lord that he killed his mom, I thought the response was appropriate, where Star-Lord just whips out and starts shooting the guns.
Yeah.
That was an appropriate response. It was funny when David Hasselhoff appeared. Yeah. That was like that's like a good Guardians of the Galaxy joke to me. a serious moment you're taking very serious. Yeah. It's intense, and you get this unexpected, rewarding, really funny joke with Hasselhoff appearing.
Here's something about your character in an unexpected
but it makes sense. Yeah. It makes sense why he was...
Because it's in context of the characters. Again, you know, like...
see, the film, as you point out, the non-spoiler, without really revealing it, was how you kind of don't see Kurt Russell anymore. You just see, a lot of destruction. Ego's going, he goes super villain territory, where he's just hell-bent on, all the things he's hell-bent on.
Yeah,
and he just becomes it becomes cliche. That's just the bottom line.
It does. It stops because that's what that did leave a sour taste in my mouth because you meet Ego. And Kurt Russell brings a lot to it. Like, he's not just hanging out. Like, there are some moments where he's really affecting. And then when it finally comes to a head, and we find out what his plan is, why he's got Star-Lord with him, all that stuff, all that nuance just disappears. And then it's just like, I gotta kill you now.
And I think a lot of it is faults on the way the writing was handled with Star-Lord, though. Because, okay, Star-Lord shooting his dad at first made perfect sense to me in the moment. What didn't make sense to me was how the whole finale progressed in terms of Star-Lord's perspective, and even after the finale with the big action scenes were done, how I felt like, okay, if you couldn't include this in any of the crazy action scenes, you could have at least included this in after all the action was done and they're flying off into safety. I thought you could have had one scene where Star-Lord's talking with Gomorrah about, my whole life I've wanted to know my dad. I learned who my dad is. I'm bonding with him. I learn about these gifts that I have. Because he was truly having a real bond and loving his father and having this hope in this new future.
So, like, the day Star-Lord has in this movie is a thick day. He meets his father for the first time, which is a huge part of his life. He learns about an entirely different side of who he is. And then all that stuff is taken away, just as soon as it popped up. And that's got to do something to your character.
There's no sense of remorse or hurt.
We don't get to spend time with him in the aftermath, which say what you
will,
it's Marvel, nobody comes to after this. But it's, if you want us to care about these characters, give us that stuff.
That's what I mean by the details of the characters responding to things, though. There should have been a feeling, if the word's not guilt of having to kill this guy because you realize he really is hell-bent on evil, there should have been a feeling of hurt or disappointment or something in Star-Lord. Instead, Star-Lord's whole arc is he realizes Yondu wasn't really all that bad of a guy. This film is just a mixed bag to me, because that really bothered me, that he wasn't affected by that. What worked for me was Yondu's growth and the relationship that Star-Lord eventually ends on with him.
Seriously, this movie does feel like it belongs to Yondu, because Yondu gets everything. Yondu gets some comedy, he gets character moments, he gets the challenges, he has to step up. Yondu is the person who steps up and makes the sacrifice in this movie.
Because the whole moment where Yondu, he gives... And I like the whole, spacesuit design. I can't remember if that's in the first one, actually. But I like the whole...
bubble wrap thing?
Yeah. The whole bubble wrap spacesuit thing. That was a great moment where he gives him the spacesuit, and then Yondu sacrifices himself to save Star-Lord.
And it's a beautiful moment.
Yeah, and they had great, because in a way, it's one of those sequels in terms of Yondu where it will probably enhance the experience of watching Yondu in the first one, because they didn't can anything from the first one. They made all those things work. How Yondu said he would eat him, and how Star-Lord, Yondu laughs at him in this one because Yondu's like, you believe me? And I would joke. It was a joke, Yondu would have never really done that. You see how Yondu was really protecting Star-Lord because he saw that Ego is, loves to have sex and kills all his children.
And that is a cool thing about this movie, is you get to, through Peter Quill, but also especially through Yondu, you get to watch these guys who have to think about maintaining status and being tough, but who are also characters inside, who aren't just Ravagers,
And Yondu gets the redemption moment, and we'll touch on Stallone's scene in a second, but when, all the Ravagers show up, and they're doing the fireworks, I started crying.
The funeral is beautiful.
Yeah, the funeral was a very effective scene. I wasn't crying there, but when the Ravagers showed up, I started crying because I'm like, this is it. Yondu gets his relationship with Star-Lord. It has the resolution with him. And the Ravagers love and respect him again.
We watched the end of Fast and the Furious 7 like a couple days ago. And watching the end of Guardians 2 was like, I felt like Michael Rooker really died.
Yeah.
I was like, this is beautiful.
They give him a great payoff.
They really paid this character off. And that's a weird thing. Like, that is a huge positive about this movie for me, is like, all that Yondu stuff left an impact on me. Like, they made a sacrifice. Like, I don't know if they'll retcon everything and bring him back or whatever, but that character died, and I was sad about it. And, like,
okay,
great.
And going back to an earlier point about Rocket Raccoon.
Yeah.
When Yondu died, one of my first thoughts went back to Rocket.
Yeah.
Which was, if Rocket didn't steal the batteries, the batteries helped in blowing up the brain, sure. But at the same time, though, I felt like they could have, because when they think about it like this, in the finale, when they first go into when they first go into Ego's brain, Mantis is able to just easily put Ego to sleep, and they could have figured out a way to destroy Ego's brain.
Yeah.
They would have had the time to do it.
Yeah.
But and when they were shooting it up they were destroying it. They were making an impact on it. But then when the Gold of the Sovereign people showed up because Rocket stole some batteries, that messed up the entire plan, the entire process, and they probably could have destroyed Ego and gotten off the planet if Rocket didn't steal those batteries.
It's a really weird, it's just a really weird actions have consequences subplot.
But Rocket doesn't feel the consequence to this thing of a man he really bonded with. You know?
And they do that thing where they bother to go, oh, all these ships are unmanned. They're piloted remotely. So they just destroy all these ships in mass and then go about their day, and it just feels like this thing that keeps barging into the movie.
Like when the Sovereign people first showed up in Ego's brain, I thought it was going to do a route that I would have been okay with. I probably would have actually preferred it, even though I would have found it a little predictable. I would have preferred if it went this way, which was they kind of learn what's going on here. And they have to work together and destroy Ego,
Yeah.
But instead, no, they're just bad guys.
And then after they help destroy Ego, then they can go, also, still you for stealing our batteries, we gotta have a talk about this.
Exactly.
Or in light of what they were used for, we'll let this one slide or something. But yeah, they just show up to also fight, and...
Yeah,
it just makes everything kind of mess. It feels kind of like a mess,
And these are like specific details that we're talking on that what led to the disappointment of the film for me, and especially the comedy moments though. Like touching off of some, I remember exactly when I thought the comedy in here reminds me of Men in Black 2. Okay, when we started getting like sex jokes. More vulgar jokes than the first one, because I'm like, that's what Men in Black 2 did. They amped up the vulgarity because they're probably running low on some truly witty comedy material right now.
Yeah, and that's in James Gunn's wheelhouse, and that's something Marvel is probably at least giving him the flexibility to bring in to flesh out their universe and make it different.
Well, the scene though that really, really showed what I knew this movie was failing on a lot of the comedy for me. There's this moment because where Yondu takes over kind of her position with Ravagers, and then she wants to get a ship. She's talking to Sean Gunn, and she wants a ship because she's like, I want to. Then she starts getting. They have this shot where it's slowly panning in on her. She's giving her what her mission speech
Who are we
is.
Talking about?
Nebula. Sorry, yeah. Where Nebula is giving her speech about I'm going to have vengeance on Gomorrah and I'm going to kill Thanos, and it's this long speech. A little bit into the speech, I was thinking, oh, there's a punchline coming.
Yeah.
There's going to be an obvious punchline, probably from Sean Gunn, right when she's done talking, where the music's going to cut off and then he's going to say something that's supposed to be funny.
Yeah.
The first movie had not a single moment like that for me. The first movie probably would have handled it in a way where I'm believing Nebula's speech and I'm feeling the moment. And I didn't see that joke from Sean Gunn coming.
Yeah.
It was, and then in this packed theater that was initially having a good time, Sean Gunn makes a joke, says more funny stuff. No one laughed. No one, not a single laughter in the whole audience. It was that exact scene where I was like, here's where the comedy is failing for me. And a lot of comedy moments just don't hit, where they're like clearly off, like not just like a throwaway joke where it's okay that no one laughed at that. You know, like when the Sovereigns meet Yondu and they're rolling out the carpet and then it stops and they have a problem like, haha, we didn't see that coming, I guess, but it just doesn't kind of fit in that moment.
Well, it's that thing of like, I get this joke and this joke is also going to take its time and it's not a fresh joke anymore.
Yeah,
like,
it's not.
I've already seen this joke happen, and that happens more than once.
Yeah.
And also, just sidebar, shouts out to Sean Gunn, because I thought he's really good.
Yeah, he's handled well.
Like, just him as his performance, I thought was surprisingly good.
And he had one of the funniest, like, he had the best post-credit scene to me.
Yeah.
His post-credit scene where he's trying to figure out how to use the arrow, and the whole time you're thinking, like, oh, shoot, he's going to hit himself. He's going to hit himself. He ends up stabbing Drax instead.
Yeah.
Was really funny. That was a hysterical scene, actually. And I like how they didn't put so much emphasis on him, but they put just enough to the point where the mantle of the arrow being passed down to him made enough sense to me. Because he has a scene where he sides against Yondu, but then eventually he goes back to Yondu and helps him escape from the prison and all that stuff. He gives him back his arrow, gives him back the prototype of the fin, and so he earned that spot. I felt for him to be more part of the Guardians of the Galaxy, maybe even in Infinity War. I don't know.
I hope so. That's something I would like to see, and that's something that was a highlight for sure.
And Stallone's, he probably had 2 days of shooting on this movie. All the talk about who's Stallone playing in this film. He literally probably only had a couple of days of shooting. And his scene, though, with Yondu, where you're learning, oh, this is Yondu's past. He comes from the Ravagers, and there was a code, and all these like really important things, and Stallone's character feels betrayed by Yondu. I feel like technically Stallone did a good job. I felt, though, that like, the character's not really involved in the film. So if you're going to use Stallone, I feel like give him something that's a lot more, I don't know, prominent or definitive. And I mean, when you see the post-credit scene, it makes it more special, I guess, when you see like, oh, this is more referencing the OG Guardians of the Galaxy and stuff.
It's one of those things where he shows up and you're like, I bet he'll be bigger in the future.
Like, hopefully.
Hopefully. I can't see why they would do that sting if they weren't, unless they're just like, this is happening in the universe, but you're not going to see it.
I mean, when they talked about like Kevin Feige and I think James Gunn, they were like, it was more of just a fun thing for the Marvel fans. We don't really know if we're going to be actually involved in the future stuff.
There you go.
Yeah, but seeing Stallone though, I couldn't get fully invested in that scene. I just couldn't get invested in that scene. No. I was very distracted that this is Sylvester Stallone right now, because Stallone, while he has an occasional movie where Stallone's really good in this. Most of the time, especially him showing up in a Guardians movie, being a very serious role, not even like a fun role. He's a serious character. I had a hard time truly just being invested in that moment. I was more distracted than drawn to that scene. I feel like you could have gone with a known actor, but maybe not someone as famous or as spoofed or parodied as someone like Stallone, you know?
Yeah, I'll meet you halfway on that. Like, during that scene, I was very much like, oh yeah, this is Stallone, you know? Yeah. But I still thought it was kind of cool to see him there, and I liked the idea, at least, of him and Michael Rooker sharing a scene together, even though it isn't
I mean, what I think what everyone
a big moment.
I think what everyone really wanted was a scene with Kurt Russell and Stallone.
That would have been real cool.
Tango and Cash.
Tango and Cash. Hell yeah. I do want to touch on just really quick. I did like that they finally gave Gomorrah something else to do, because I'm getting kind of tired of the dynamic of like, oh, you know, male lead and female lead, are they gonna get together? Is there romance there? Like, I'm to be honest, I'm a bit tired of that plot line. And so, like, when they spiraled her off with Nebula and gave the sisters a story, I thought that was really cool.
I mean, we've primarily talked about our issues with the film. Whatever, you're gonna have to deal with that noise for now.
It's okay. It's family friendly.
Yeah. If you and speak like one of the positives, I thought I did like. While I'm not a huge fan of the actress's performance of Nebula, I mean, I think she does a good enough job. I like the relationship that develops with Nebula and Gomorrah. I like how I cried. I teared up when Gomorrah goes to hug her at the end, and Nebula is not sure how to respond. You know, I actually teared up because this whole movie they haven't gotten along at all, you know.
And they don't have the thickest conversations, but the conversations they have, I liked what they were talking about. I liked the issues they were confronting in their relationship, and I liked the tension of not exactly knowing what to think of Nebula in these scenes. Should we believe her? Like those moments, those recurring motifs that the movie takes time to build upon. Are we supposed to trust Ego, or does Nebula have a point here, or is she conniving? Like those things are I thought were pretty cool narrative choices.
Yeah, she became like what they do with Yondu and Nebula, two characters who were antagonists in the first one. They have them grow in a natural way where you see another layer to them that feels authentic, feels organic. It doesn't feel like they're just trying to make these guys good characters now to keep them around for a franchise or something.
Yeah.
Well, obviously not Yondu because he's dead.
Yeah.
But Nebula especially, and I love the touches of actually hearing real specifics on why Nebula hates Gomorrah. Because in the first one, it's just more like Thanos shows up, Gomorrah's my favorite daughter. You're like, okay, Nebula's just jealous. Here you're like, I really get why Nebula hates Gomorrah. Like, I get it.
She's her Loki. I mean, it's that whole thing.
She's a robot because Gomorrah constantly beat her.
Yeah, every time you beat me, Dad took off one of my limbs and replaced it with robot shit, and that stuff. And replaced it with robot pieces, and that's messed up. That made me feel again. That was a moment that really made me feel.
That's what I mean. I really understand. It wasn't just like Nebula, put your ego down. It was like I actually really understand why you hate Gomorrah. Why all your hate for your dad has been transferred over into Gomorrah as well.
Yeah, and that's an easy place for movies like these to stumble, and I appreciate that they made a bigger choice, a choice that you can't just meet with a, come on, drop it. There are more important things,
real quick, going off of a point you were making earlier, in terms of the whole will they, won't they thing with Gomorrah and Star-Lord. This one, you can totally fault me on this. Anyone in the comments, you can totally fault me for saying I'm being nitpicky about this. However, I will still argue that I think the first Guardian script would have thought about this a little bit.
Yeah.
If you do the math, Peter Quill is 8 or 9 or something. He's not even 10, I think. He looks like a 10-year-old, but I don't think he is, because you do the math of how this movie starts off in 1980 and they still haven't had a child yet, Ego and Peter's mom. And then I think the first one takes place in 88 in the beginning or 89. It's in the 80s, obviously.
So he's a little kid.
He's definitely not older than 10.
He's not the kind of kid who would be aware of certain things.
Yeah. So when all the TV shows that Star-Lord's listing off in this movie, I'm like, okay, maybe he happened to really absorb all these shows, and all his time in space allowed him to not forget about this.
Or maybe he tracked down reruns somehow. It's a big universe. I'll give you that.
Yeah, but when he's talking about ratings and the way TV shows work and the will they, won't they stuff, the format of sitcoms.
I was like, you weren't around.
What 9-year-old would absorb this piece of information and study sitcoms to this degree?
And how readily available was that information in the 80s?
Yeah.
It's not like the TV analysis and commentary industry was not what it is now.
Because I'm like, okay, I'm fine that the script is willing to make fun of that. It's just, as a detail nitpick, I just didn't buy that this little kid would have picked up on all this information.
Yeah, because it's and they remind you of his backstory. You're like, he spent a lot of time on a Ravager ship being afraid he was going to be eaten. So it's not like he just returned to Earth and just chilled out.
Yeah.
So there are details that do pull you out and make you go, that I can see your script. I can see it.
That's the thing, and that's why I would compare a lot of the comedy to Men in Black 2.
Yeah.
Because it was I feel the script. Yeah.
It doesn't coalesce quite the right way, and it's, I don't know, it's a strange movie because of all this, because it's perplexing to me, because the first movie I felt had a really nice grip on its tone, and it pitched everything in the right level, and this movie pitches some things the right level, and some things just feel really slippery.
Yeah, it's a super mixed bag. Yondu was the only thing that was like perfectly handled for me.
Exactly. I think this whole plot is great.
Yeah.
Every time we're focused on that guy, it's great. Also, just shouts out to the woman who played Mantis, because I did like that character. I liked her characterization. I liked what she brought to it. I liked having a new character around. And again, I wish her scenes were better, or that the script. You brought up actually a good point about her.
I still question why she was there.
Yeah. And that was a point that I didn't even think about. And when you brought it up, I was like, yeah, you really are just here to keep this guy sleep when he wants to?
That's the only reason Ego has let you in on his whole world and plan and on everything.
When your whole thing is feelings, I don't know, I just feel like if you spent all this time with him, things might have been different.
Yeah, they talk about her thing with feelings, that's not really utilized to help serve the plot other than a couple of, like, an interesting scene, you know, and a funny scene, but... And I don't know if the comics have her in there because she helps Ego fall asleep, but it kind of pulled me out thinking, wait a minute. This Ego guy has the powers of everything.
He's God.
He's God. He is God. But he can't fall asleep. Like, that's this one thing that he struggles with, and he just finds this one person, and that's her whole purpose in the movie is to help Ego. I don't know. It did pull me out a little bit. Like, oh, Ego needs to shut up.
I don't know. I wish they
makes
had
sense, but
I just wish they maybe had touched it differently, because half of my brain goes, well, I can fathom it, but the problem is the movie leaves you to figure it out all on your own. So half your brain goes, what, you can't fall asleep, really? And the other half goes, well, maybe he's just got so much in his mind and so much energy and so many things to think about that, he needs help. Like, I could see it, it's just they never bother with the characters enough to tell you.
Yeah.
And so then you're left to wonder, why is she just hanging out on this planet? That doesn't seem like a very good place.
That's what I mean. It's like there's good and bad in almost everything we talked about. Every complaint that we have usually initiated with something good the film was doing.
Yeah.
And everything, and a lot of things that were bad sometimes turn into something good. You know?
Yeah, totally.
Like, it's
Taserface.
And that's another joke that just, like, okay, Rocket laughing about Taserface in context with the character.
That's good.
Scene makes sense. I like how the Ravagers all start laughing at him.
He's not a good nickname.
Really out of place point for me in the film was when the Sovereign is talking with the burning Ravagers and Taserface is all messed up, and then the Sovereign asks, "What's your name?" Taserface. And then Sovereign starts cracking up. And when I was in that scene, I was thinking, okay, I don't really know these gold people, but I do know they wouldn't laugh in this particular moment.
Yeah, and I'm also like, do they know what tasers are?
It wasn't even like a laugh.
Tasers?
It was like the gold person turned into Drax.
Yeah, exactly. And that just leaves you to, like, I feel like that moment could have worked with a different character, because now I'm just wondering about the rules. I'm like, do the Sovereign have tasers? Do they know what tasers are? You know, is that in character for her? Just crack up at this random dude she's doing business
who's
with
clearly
right now?
about to die, you know?
Yeah, it's just a strange moment that doesn't have enough around it to not make me just get distracted and start thinking about how it works, you know? And that's where nitpicks come from, I guess.
But that's the thing, is that what makes the first one so special is those little moments.
Yeah, they didn't pull me out. You know,
like, I think of, like, one of the little details of Guardians 1 that I love so much is the prison breakout scene, where they all have very specific tasks of what to do, and the scene's intense and exciting, and they're cutting back and forth to all this action, and the film takes a moment to just stop, and Star-Lord standing across from the guy with the peg leg, and it's quiet, and the guy just goes, "You need my what?" Like that.
Yeah, because that conversation's still gonna be weird, no matter what's happening outside. And, like, that's a great illustration of, like,
those details.
Contrast.
Those are great.
Yeah.
Perfect little detail touches, or taking sweet moments, like when they're all deciding, like, should they die going after Ronan, and they all start standing up, and Rocket's like, "All right, I'm in." And then he goes, "Are you happy?" "I'm standing." We're all standing like a bunch of jackasses. Like, that's a great moment. Like, but here the comedy just, it's either you see a joke coming or the joke doesn't work often. But yeah, it's a super mixity baggity for me.
Yeah,
So,
I just don't think they approached it from
Yeah.
where do these characters go next. I feel like they approached it from like, okay, what do we give everybody? What do we give the fans?
because
you
like the villain problem in Marvel movies, I would have said they nailed it, solved it if they handled the finale with Ego better.
If
'Cause
they had any
everything with
nuance.
Ego before that, perfect. It was great.
Because it presents you with a nuanced problem of like this guy's been around for so long and he's
Yeah.
seen so much that he's just like, yeah, it's all me and I'm gonna reshape the universe in my image because I've lived so long, nothing is significant, blah blah blah. And then it just becomes the same thing we've seen a bunch of times lately, which is human beings are disappointing and so is
Yeah.
life, so I'm just gonna reshape I'm just gonna kill everything.
Yeah, and I'm just evil now.
Yeah, and the thing is like
what happened to the layers?
he wants his son, he wants him to work with him. I feel like a character who's that old and that wise, when Star-Lord is not down, I don't think he would just immediately go, well, I gotta kill you the most extreme way possible. It just, I feel like it betrays that character, and then it makes it worse. It's like, you had this great setup, you got a good actor who showed up to do this, and then when it comes time for the climax to start, he's just another big, all-powerful bad guy we have to shoot a lot of times.
And I was another positive thing I want to touch on. I like what they're doing with Stanley.
I do too.
I like how he's involved, how he's like with the Watchers. Yeah. You see, but the post-credit scene doesn't establish that he's part of the Watchers because they start leaving and he goes, "You're my ride home."
Yeah.
So we don't know like what he was doing there with the Watchers, but I like how they're building up that we're probably gonna find out who Stan Lee's been this whole time, you know?
Yes, so they've in the continuity now, Stan Lee is the same Stan Lee in every single movie, even when he was Hugh Hefner.
Yeah, exactly. Well, he wasn't Hugh Hefner.
Yeah, he was. Somebody says Mr. Hefner as he walks down the
Well,
thing.
no, I think Tony just mistakes him for Hugh.
Oh, is that what
He
happened?
pats him on the back and he goes, "Hey, Hef," or something, and then turns and it's like, "Oh, it's not Hugh Hefner, it's Stan Lee."
Okay, all right, that makes sense.
Just know you're Marvel.
Well, that's a debate. He was still like, now in context, he might not be Hugh Hefner, but at the time, he was just Hugh Hefner to me.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that's true. We will have to wait to find out.
We'll never know. But yeah,
I
Guardians
think
of the
when
Galaxy.
Stan Lee's 120 and Marvel's in their 45th film, I think we're finally going to find out who Stan Lee is.
They'll finally make a movie starring Stan
They should have
Lee.
started milking this a long time. not wait till Stan Lee's like approaching 100. Anyway, yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. Our non-spoiler review probably wouldn't upset as many people as that, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of Marvel fanboys who are commenting, saying like, "Oh, you guys are just talking crap the whole time." Well, hey, honestly, I know we're not the only ones who were disappointed, and in order to explain that, because when you talk a non-spoiler one, it's hard to explain why you're disappointed. With the spoiler, it's like we're gonna take the time to thoroughly explain this so you understand.
Yeah, well, and the other thing about that is just I know a lot of people who've seen it who've also most people I know who've seen this movie are very enthusiastic about it. However, I don't think I've heard one person not include it's not as good as the first one.
Yeah.
Like everybody I know, even the people who are like, "Oh, it was so awesome," are still like, "First one's better." But
Yeah.
So
there's plenty of enjoyability to still be had.
And
I wouldn't skip it,
Yeah, and the thing is, at least on my terms, I still had a really fun time.
Yeah.
I still had a good time watching this movie. I think you'll still enjoy yourself. There's still stuff that works.
Well, it's because it's a mixed bag.
Yeah, it's a totally
it
mixed
goes
bag.
from to that was really cool.
Yeah,
that's hilarious.
There's great stuff. There's bad stuff. There's in between stuff.
Yeah, because it's not like a solid first half is great, second half is bad. It's like it's all in between. It just keeps fluctuating from great to not so good. Anyway, yeah, there's a spoiler review. Happy to have some of you agree, and happy to have a lot of you get mad at us. Subscribe to The Real Rejects. Reasons to Jerry on Twitter and Instagram. Social media manager at Blumity Blumhouse and The Real Rejects.
Yep.
Just got a Patreon. Go check out all the exclusive content on there and all the awesome rewards we got over there.
Uncensored video content.
Uncensored! And I wonder if YouTube will cause this to be in restricted mode by just doing this one motion.
Well, we got to test all the boundaries out.
We gotta test all the boundaries. Is this restricted? Is this restricted? What about this?